be seated. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Elwood. I'm the Dean of the Harvard Kennedy School here. Welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. We have a very special guest this evening, President Yudhoyono of Indonesia, and I'll introduce him shortly. But I first of all want to welcome all of you to being here at this, on this important occasion. And I also want to remind those of you who have not been to the forum before about our ground rules, just so that everyone understands. This is one of the premier venues, not only in the university, but perhaps in the country, even in the world, for remarkable speakers, and we have a closeness and a connection that is really unparalleled. But as part of that, there are only a couple of rules. The first is, any speaker that comes must take questions, free and unfettered questions, from the audience. And in exchange, we grant that speaker the right to speak uninterrupted, so that he can make, or she can make, whatever important points they want to make. So that's the simple ground rules. If you violate those rules, we'll have to ask you to be escorted out. But in fact, we do not have that problem on almost any occasion, and I thank you. Let me also mention, by the way, this is a high security event, so trying to violate the rules or doing such things isn't necessarily wise. So with that, let me now turn to introducing our speaker tonight. I should start by saying, by acknowledging several people that are here. First of all, I want to acknowledge the First Lady, Madam Bambang Yudhoyono, who's sitting right here. His Excellency Susilo Bambang, who is the Cabinet Secretary. And Her Excellency Marie Pangesto, Minister of Trade. I also should mention another couple of other people in the audience, one of which, Gider Wiryawan, who has been quite instrumental in not only helping put all this together, he's a graduate of this school, and close to my heart, he's also sponsored a fellowship here for students from Indonesia. And let me also mention that President Yudhoyono has shared not only his time and his insights with us today, and his family for this day, but also his son is a student here at the school, and we're very, very proud to have First Lieutenant Agud Harimurti Yudhoyono. Captain, I'm sorry. Well, bad staff work on my part. Captain, where are you, Captain? There you are. Finally, I want to acknowledge the people at the Institute of Politics and here at the Forum, and in particular Bill Purcell, for all his fine work and everything else that's going on here. So let me now say a few words about tonight's guest. Indonesia is an extraordinarily beautiful and increasingly vital part of the world. It's the world's fourth largest country by population and comprises the world's largest Muslim population. Now, if you'd gone back here just 10 years, 10, 11 years, 1998, things did not look good for Indonesia. The economy was, frankly, in free fall. An authoritarian leader had just fallen. There were issues about parts of the country were looking for separation, and there was battles, and there was ethnic tension, and in subsequent years, natural disasters and the like. Today, it is a very, very different picture. And it is a remarkable transformation in just over 10 years. And indeed, now Indonesia finds itself as a model in many respects, and largely at the epicenter. And tonight's guest gets a great deal of credit for that transformation. Perhaps Secretary of State Hillary Clinton put it best when she said it earlier during her trip this year to Indonesia, if you want to know whether Islam, democracy, modernity, and women's rights can coexist, go to Indonesia. And if that were not enough, our own President Barack Obama spent 4 formative years of his life in Jakarta. So President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono was born in East Java. He graduated from the military academy in 1973 at the top of his class. One of the most remarkable features of this leader is the number of different ways in which he has served and the number of different ways in which he learns and grows. During his 27 years, of course, he served in numerous posts, both staff and line, both in the field and at headquarters, in missions overseas, including the UN military observers in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where he was commander of the Indonesia contingent. During this time, he also managed to earn a master's degree in management at Webster University in St. Louis in the United States here in 1991. After retiring from the military, President Yudhoyono, not president at that stage, held various government positions, including Minister of Mining and Energy and Coordinating Minister for Political, Social, and Security Affairs. In 2004, he earned his doctorate in economics in Indonesia, and that same year, he ran for president of Indonesia. And he ran on a platform for, quote, more just, more peaceful, more prosperous, and more democratic Indonesia. And he was elected the 6th President of the Republic, gaining 60% of the popular vote. In many respects, many outside observers would agree that all of his pledges have indeed made progress. This in spite of the fact that he's had to deal with a host of challenges, including a tsunami, earthquakes, terrorist attacks, terrorist raids, preventing attacks, rapidly shifting oil prices, and now, of course, the financial crisis. He has nevertheless sought to advance reforms in many domains, economic as well as social, and notably has been quite successful in promoting peace in Aceh. And today, when most economies are deep in recession, the growth rate in Indonesia is in the range of 4.5%. Truly an amazing achievement. This is really a critical time for Indonesia and the world, because this nation lies very much at the center, very close to the epicenter of so-called clash of civilizations and development for climate change, the economy, of trade. And if Indonesia can lead the way, we all have a much, much brighter future. So perhaps we're quite fortunate that the President is the author of several books on the economy. He's also a poet, and he's even been a writer of songs that have been turned into albums. I don't know if you're going to break into song tonight, but perhaps I should also point out that during his stay here in Boston and Cambridge, he's been here a couple of days, he has spent much of his time meeting with professors and faculty members and so forth from Harvard, from MIT, from other universities around the area. Frankly, the very best that Harvard has to offer. That's a remarkable statement about the kind of intelligence as well as desire for insight that the President, I believe, brings here. So perhaps it should be no surprise that he was reelected easily for his second 5-year term, which begins in a few short weeks. I am happy to say that this is we could say that this is the last foreign speech he's giving of his first term, but we like to think of it as a hint into his first real speech of his second term. So please welcome me in joining to our stage tonight, President Yudhoyono. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Elwood, for your nice introductions. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Professor David Elwood, Dean of the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Professor John Thomas, faculty members, students, dear friends. I am honored to be here today to address the distinguished faculty and students of Harvard University. I am impressed with the turnout this evening, and for the students, I hope you are not here today as an excuse to skip class. I must admit, I have wanted to visit Harvard for a long time. Several of my ministers, successful businessmen, and military generals were fortunate to study here. Don't take this the wrong way, but I find it interesting that I did not end up working for people who went to Harvard. It's actually people who went to Harvard who ended up working for me. I am proud that my son, Captain Agus, was able to join this prestigious Harvard program. So now, other than being a loyal soldier in the Indonesian Army, he is also another Harvard student working for me. Several months ago, President Barack Obama made a historic speech in Cairo, seeking to redefine relations between America and Muslim world. As president of the country with the world's largest Muslim population, I would like today to respond to that speech. President Obama delivered his speech at Cairo University, one of the best universities in the Islamic world. I speak today at Harvard, the oldest and most prestigious university in America. And please do not tell people in Princeton and Yale I said this. But our objective is the same, to take a hard look at relations between the West and the Islamic world and to chart a new course forward. It is fitting that I come here after the G20 summit in Pittsburgh. For to me, the G20 is one manifestation of the change taking place in global politics. The G20 groupings, comprising some 85% of the world's GNP and 80% of the world trade, is not just an economic powerhouse, it is also a civilizational powerhouse. The G20 for the first time accommodates all the major civilizations, not just Western countries, but also China, South Korea, India, South Africa, and others, including significantly 3 countries with large Muslim populations, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Indonesia. The G7, the G8, or even the United Nations Security Council does not pose this distinction. The G20 is representative of a multi-civilizational global community. Perhaps this is why the G20 has been successful in arresting a global meltdown. The swift and coordinated actions of G20 economies have started the stabilization of our financial systems and restored confidence, prompting today's early sign of modest economic recovery. We are very pleased that at the close of Pittsburgh, the G20 has been institutionalized and looks set to be the premier forum for international economic cooperation. This comes not a moment too soon, for the world civilization should be properly represented in one defining forum. Civilization. They at once define us and divide us. Is harmony between our civilization truly elusive, so out of reach? Can we just not get along? 60 years ago, I should say 16 years ago, the late Samuel Huntington, a son of this university, published an essay proposing that after the Cold War, civilizations, regions, and cultures would become the defining feature of international relations and would constitute the primary cause of conflicts between and within nations. To me, the term clash of civilization itself is counterproductive. If they hear it often enough, some people may think that the word is such and accept it as reality. I don't believe the civilizations are inherently incompatible and prone to conflict when they interact. This is what I saw firsthand at the G20, where nations of diverse cultural background join hands to address a common challenge. We spoke different languages through our headphones, but we understood one another. Huntington sought to understand post-Cold War fault lines and warned us of potential turbulence. This is not a trivial reminder. Civilization issues arrive in modern politics. As policymakers, our job is to prevent such prognosis from becoming reality. Indeed, Huntington's warning has been relevant to Indonesia's experience. In the roller coaster years following independence, Indonesia has suffered separatist threat, ethnic and religious conflict, and Islamic insurgencies. But we overcame these challenges. We adapted, and instead of failing, we have thrived. Today, we are not a hotbed of communal violence. We are by and large an archipelago of peace. Today, we are not at the brink of balkanization. We have instead fortified our national identity through successful, peaceful national elections. Today, we are not victims of past authoritarian, centralized government, but a model of democracy and decentralization. Today, we are not paralyzed by financial crisis, but forging ahead with sweeping reforms of our financial and industrial structure. And Indonesia today is a dynamic emerging economy, enjoying one of the highest growth rates in Asia after China and India. Thus, no matter how deep and seemingly divisive the civilizational forces facing Indonesia, the ethnic differences and religious conflict, we overcame them. This is despite the enormous challenges of democracy and development that still confront us. Please do not misunderstand me. I am aware of the painful realities of our world. I am aware of the 4,000 years of painful relation between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. I am aware of traumatic collective memory that is not easy to erase. When dealing with matters of faith, we face basic human emotions that predated modern state. These emotions are complicated, stubborn, and will likely become more problematic as religiosity intensifies worldwide. According to some estimate, Islam will be the world's largest religion by 2025, accounting for some 30% of the world population. And indeed, Islam is currently the fastest growing religion in the United States. As religiosity increases, so will the politics of identity. And aided by globalization and technology, extremism and radicalism can only grow. As we transition from G8 to G20 and perhaps beyond, mutual exposure between civilizations will become the most intense humanity has ever seen. Perhaps we will even see the emergence of a global civilization. And democracy has gained immense ground, spreading in the Islamic world, including in Indonesia. There were only a handful of democracies at the turn of the 20th century. At the turn of the 21st century, there are some 89 full democracies. Even the Organization of Islamic Conference has adopted the historic Mecca Charter, committing its members to the principle of democracy, human rights, and governance. Indeed, more people now live under open pluralist societies and under religious freedom than at any other time in history. This trend can have only a positive impact on the global community. It may be naive to expect that the world can be rid of conflict and hatred, but I believe that we can fundamentally change and evolve the way civilizations, religion, and cultures interact. This is not utopia. It is a pragmatic vision. I have seen it work in Indonesia. I have seen it work in many countries. The question is, can we make it work globally? As Robert F. Kennedy once said, quoting George Bernard's song, "I dream of things that never were, and asks, why not? To highlight how I think this can possibly be achieved, let me outline 9 imperatives to achieve harmony among civilizations. If you ask me, why 9? Well, it is a bit personal because 9 is always my lucky numbers. Let me now outline these imperatives. The first imperative is to make the 21st century the century of soft power. Remember, the 20th century was the century of hard power. We saw 2 world wars, several major wars and proxy wars, and a long Cold War with risk nuclear holocaust. One estimate suggests that some 180 million people died in the wars and conflict of the last century. It is no wonder that the 20th century has been called the age of conflict. It has been the bloodiest century in memory. In contrast, the 21st century should and must be the century of soft power. But there exists a large soft power deficit that the world civilization must fill. I believe that this class of civilization is actually a class of ignorance. We are weakest when we are alone. We are strongest when we join forces with one another. There are many examples of this power of exchange and connectivity. In the 13th century, the Islamic civilization was the most sophisticated in the world because it had an enormous and indiscriminate thirst for knowledge and science, learning from all corners of the world. And this body of scientific knowledge from the Muslim world was later utilized by Western Renaissance. Civilizations have based on each other's knowledge and become enriched by them. We have done the same in Indonesia, where we have built on our exposure to Eastern, Islamic, and Western influences, culminating in the open, pluralistic, and tolerant society that we are today. In short, the cross-fertilizations of cultures can produce something wonderful, something good. The more we exchange cultures and share ideas, the more we learn from one another, the more we cooperate and spread goodwill, the more we project soft power and place it right at the heart of international relations, the closer we are to world peace. Experience has taught me that soft power is an effective weapon against conflict, just as the people of Aceh, Indonesia. For 30 years, Aceh was rife with violence. Successive Indonesian government opted for a rigid military solution because a settlement seemed so elusive. When I assumed the presidency, I pursued new approach, one defined by goodwill and trust building. I offered the separatists a win-win formula, promising them peace with dignity. Remarkably, we reached a permanent peace settlement in just 5 short rounds of negotiation. The peace agreement was fully in line with my objective to defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity, but in a civilized and democratic way. That was when my faith in soft power multiplied and why I believe it holds the key to resolving many global problems. The second imperative is to intensify the process of dialogue and outreach that now seems to be proliferating. We have seen many good initiatives. In 2001, the United Nations began the dialogue among civilizations. Spain and Turkey later launched the Alliance of Civilization. The Asia-Europe meeting, ASEM, also took up interfaith dialogue. Recently, Saudi Arabia convened the Interfaith Conference at the United Nations. Indonesia and Norway also launched, since 2006, the Global Intermediate Dialogue in the aftermath of the Khartoum crisis. All this represent a fresh approach to link civilization and religions. We must deepen the quality of these dialogues so that they produce specific actions that, as UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon points out, and I and I quote, change what people see, what they say, and ultimately how they act, end of quote. This initiative should not always be a meeting of like-minded moderates, although certainly this is also important. They should also include disbelievers, for a dialogue should not be reaffirmations, but an honest attempt to understand the concerns of the other side. The point is to listen and not just talk. A true dialogue must address age-old grievances and confront false stereotypes without presumptions and preconditions. Indeed, the best dialogue are often respectful and honest, open-ended and constructive, intense and solution-oriented. These were the quality of dialogue held in Indonesia between Muslims and Christians in conflict zone in Poso and Maluku, which culminated in a commitment to peaceful reconciliation. The third imperative is the need to find a solution to burning political conflicts that have driven a wide wedge, specifically between the Western and Muslim worlds. Today, some 2 out of 3 Muslim countries are in conflict or face a significant threat of conflict. In contrast, only 1 out of 4 non-Muslim countries face similar challenges. But despite this very complex situation, Muslims must be able to differentiate between a conflict involving Muslims and a war against Islam. I do not believe that any of the civilization, Western, Hindu, Semitic, Buddhist, Japanese, are systematically and simplistically engaged in a war against Islam. Of all the world conflict, none has captured the passions of Muslims more than the plight of the Palestinians. But this is not a religious issue. There are Christians and Jews in Palestine, and Muslim and Christian in Israel. Nonetheless, the establishment of the much-awaited Palestinian state in the framework of a two-state solution, where Palestine and Israel live side by side in peace, would be widely hailed by Muslims worldwide. It would remove a major mental barrier in their perceptions of the West, especially of the United States. Currently, many Muslims fail to notice the constructive role of the West in producing peace in Bosnia and in Kosovo, but they would surely notice and rejoice in the resolution of the Palestine dilemma. But the Palestinians too have a moral and political responsibility. It is difficult to attain and sustain statehood unless there is unity among the Palestinian faction. In my meeting with Palestinian leaders, I always told them very clearly that Indonesian freedom fighters would have never won the war for independence if they had not been united in spirit. The bottom line is, we desperately need to end the vicious cycle of conflict and violence. The timely withdrawal of Western forces from Iraq and Afghanistan would also alleviate Muslim fears of a Western hegemony. And all this political solution would reduce terrorism as a crime that deviates from the true teaching of Islam as a religion of peace. I would also turn the feeling of fear and humiliation among some Muslims into hope and self-esteem. The fourth imperative is to strengthen the voice of moderation in our communities. By nature, moderates are open-minded, flexible, and prone to an inclusive approach through outreach and partnerships. In contrast, extremists are driven by xenophobic fear and bent on confrontation and exclusion. Because both moderation and extremism will grow in the 21st century, we must make sure that moderates are empowered and take center stage in society. The moderates should no longer be a silent majority. They must speak up and defend their mainstream values in the face of opposition from the louder and more mediagenic extremists. In this vein, I find it very encouraging that Western media have unanimously refused to show the very offensive film Fitna by provocative Dutch politician Geert Wilders. This shows the media's improved sensitivity toward Islam. The moderate also have to be more proactive and less reactive. And they must show with reason and result that being a moderate brings real success, peace and progress. Extremists will always capitalize on hopelessness and desperation. We must present a better alternative. The fifth imperative is multiculturalism and tolerance. The most welcome trend in the 21st century is multiculturalism and tolerance. You cannot say this of America and many Western nations several decades ago. But today, racism is in serious decline, apartheid is gone, interracial marriages are common, and the marketplace picks talent without regard for color, religion, or ethnicity. Even the family portrait of President Barack Obama reflects this healthy multiculturalism with his Kenyan and Indonesian roots. We must all work together to ensure that multiculturalism and tolerance become a truly global norm. And when we speak tolerance, it should be more than just to tolerate others. Tolerance implies a deeper meaning. Tolerance means a full respect for others, sincerely accepting their differences and thriving on our mutual diversity. Only this type of tolerance can heal deeply seated hatred and resentment. The sixth imperative is to make globalization work for all. I do not accept the percept that, as a rule, globalization produces winners and losers. Like peace, like development, globalization can be harnessed to make winners for all. Let us be clear on this. There can be no genuine harmony among civilizations as long as the majority of the world's 1.3 billion Muslims feel left out, marginalized, and insecure about their place in the world. They are part of the 2.7 billion people worldwide who live under $2 a day. These are the sad, hard facts. Out of 57 Muslim populated countries, 25 are classified as low-income countries, 18 lower middle income, and 14 as upper middle income or higher income. And even though 1 out of every 4 people in the world are Muslim, their economies constitute 1/10 of the world economy. 1 in 4 people in Muslim countries live in extreme poverty. Almost 300 million Muslims aged 15 and above are illiterate. These statistics are, of course, unacceptable. Muslims must take ownership in their destiny. Many Muslims reminisce too much about the glory days of centuries past, when Islam was on top of the world, politically, militarily, scientifically, economically. Muslims today must be convinced that Islam's best years are ahead of us, not behind us. The 21st century can be the era of the second Islamic Renaissance. A confident, empowered, and resurgent Muslim world can partner with the West and other civilizations in building sustainable peace and prosperity. But to do this, Muslims must change their mindset. Like the remarkable 13th century Muslim before them, they must be open-minded, innovative, and take risk. There are inspirational Muslims everywhere. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, Orhan Pamuk, Muhammad Ali, Zidane, Hakim Olajuwon, Farid Zakaria, and rapper Akon. Countries like United Arab Emirates and Qatar have shown that with good governance, self-esteem, and a progressive worldview, they can change their nation's fortune in 1 generation. And Indonesia has shown that Islam, modernity, and democracy, as said by Professor Elwood, plus economic growth and national unity can be a powerful partnership. In short, the word citizen, the children of all civilization, must be equal partners and benefactors of globalization. A recent survey in The Economist found that, for the first time, more than half of the world population can be loosely considered middle class. If this is true, then we have a reasonable chance, a reasonable chance to reach zero poverty worldwide by the end of this century. With the emerging economic order that is now unfolding, getting from here to there would require intense intercultural and interreligious harmony. This should be the shared goal of all our nations. The seventh imperative is to reform global governance. Earlier, I talked about how the G20 summit is more representative of today's global dynamic. Unfortunately, this is the exception rather than the rule. For example, the UN Security Council today still reflects the power balance of 1945 rather than 2009, with exclusive veto powers reserved for 4 Western nations and China. It is unfortunate that recent efforts to reform the United Nations Security Council have not been successful. This situation is unsustainable. The UN Security Council will need to be restructured to keep up with the 21st century geopolitical realities. Imperative number 8 is education. Politicians often overlook educational opportunities in both our homes and our classroom. But the answer to the world problem are there, for it is also there that hatred and prejudice breed. These are the real battleground for the hearts and minds of future generations. It is at these places that we must turn ignorance into compassion and intolerance into respect. The foot soldiers here are parents, teachers, and community leaders. We must inculcate in our school curriculum the culture of moderation, tolerance, and peace. We must help our children and our students develop a sense of common humanity, which allows them to see a world of amity, not a world of enmity. In Indonesia, elementary students are taught about respecting religious tradition. Exam question asks Muslim students what they should do if their Christian neighbors invite them to celebrate Christmas. We are probably the only country in the world where each religious holidays, Islamic, Catholic, Protestant, Hindu, Buddhist, are designated as national holidays, even though Hindus and Buddhists account for only 2.4% of our population. Through education, we have sought to ensure that tolerance and respect for religious freedom becomes part of our transgenerational DNA. Finally, the ninth imperative, global conscience. It is not easy to describe this, but this is what I saw in Aceh during the tsunami tragedy. On the 26th December 2004, giant tsunami wave crashed Aceh and Nias, and 200,000 people perished in half an hour. The whole nation was in grief. But in this tragedy, we also found humanity. The whole world wept and offered helping hands. Americans, Australians, Singaporean, Chinese, Mexican, Indian, Turks, and other international volunteers worked hand in hand to help the Acehnese. I realized then there exists a powerful global conscience. One would think that the enormous pain of World War II would usher in a new dawn of world peace. That is why the United Nations was formed. But the human race ended up with many more wars. One would think the threat of the nuclear holocaust was enough to trigger nuclear disarmament. But the world saw more countries developing nuclear weapons. The question now is whether climate change would be able to foster a new global conscience. We are still not sure that it will. But a global conscience could well have transcended whatever civilization, religious and cultural divide that has faced humanity. So there are my 9 imperatives for harmony among civilizations that I offer to you today. They will require a great deal of hard work. It will take the work of generations and decades. And it will require patience, perseverance, partnership, and lots of thinking outside the box. 18 years after the Cold War ended, 10 years into the 21st century, we find ourselves at a crucial crossroad. In front of us may be the most progressive century mankind has ever known, a century where, as Farid Zakaria says, more things will change in the next 10 years than in the past 100 years. It can be the century of possibility and opportunity. President Barack Obama spoke in Cairo of a new beginning between America and the Muslim world. Today, I say that we can reinvent a new world. It will be a world not of conquest, but of connectivity. It will be a world defined not by a class of civilization, but by the confluence of civilization. It will be a world marked by plenty, not by poverty. And it will be a vast empire of global minds, breaking down centuries of civilizational collisions and hostilities. America, with all the economic, social, and technological resources at her disposal, has much to contribute to this new world. America's role in helping to reform the international system, spread prosperity, empower the world's poor, resolve conflict, and share knowledge is a critical asset to a transforming world. Now is a golden opportunity for America to inundate the world with her soft power, not hard power. America should not worry about retaining its superpower status. America can help make the world anew. What could be more powerful than definitive than that? Indonesia, too, has a significant role to play. We can bridge between Islamic and the Western worlds. We can project the virtue of moderate Islam throughout the Muslim world. We can be the bastions of freedom, tolerance, and harmony. We can be a powerful examples that, once again, Islam, democracy, and modernity can go hand in hand. And we will continue to advance Indonesia's transformation through democracy, development, and harmony. This is why Indonesia and America now are evolving a strategic partnership. The world's second and the third largest democracies, the most powerful Western country, and the country with the largest Muslim population. Calibrated for the challenges of the 21st century, this partnership can strengthen regional stability, inter-civilizational unity, and world peace. In the final analysis, vast oceans separate our countries, but our common search unite. We are both trying to redefine our place in the world. President Obama insists the 21st century can still be the American century. I am convinced that this could well be Asia's century. Then I thought, why can't it be everybody's century? It can be the American century. It can be the Asian century. It can be the European century. It can be the African century. And it can be the Islamic century. This can be an amazing century where hope prevails over fear, where brotherhood of man reigns supreme, where human progress conquers ignorance. It can be a century that not only brings us into a new millennium, but also elevate the bonds of humanity to greater height. In this century, no one loses, and everybody wins. Inshallah. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. We now turn to the opportunity for people to ask questions. There are 4 microphones located in the audience. One is right here, another is up there, a third one is here, and the fourth one is here. Now, let me remind you of the basic ground rules about questions. A good question has 3 characteristics. The first one is you state your name and affiliation. The second is that it is short and contains but one thought. And the third is it ends in a question mark. And so with that, let's start right here.
Good evening, Mr. President. My name's Adam Cooper. I'm a student here at the Kennedy School. A few weeks ago, the Australian police announced that they were launching a war crimes probe into the deaths of 5 Australian journalists who were killed 30 years ago during Indonesia's occupation of East Timor, a move that you've described as inaccurate and that could damage relations with your government. How do you reconcile your position on this issue with your professed commitment to human rights and democracy?
Well, related to our past with East Timor, Timor-Leste, both nations, both governments agreed to choose the so-called a truth and friendships solutions. We have done a lot in settling down the issues between the 2 countries. Actually, this is a long process how to deal with this issue. I do understand that there are many incidents in the past during the war, during conflict. But in this case, the position of Indonesia, as also the position of Timor-Leste, try to solve this situation by looking ahead, by choosing the framework of truth and friendship and reconciliation, and it's not justice. In the past, there were courts established in Indonesia to deal with the happenings in East Timor in 1999. So I have told to my counterparts, the leaders of Australia, this position, and we are willing to cooperate with Australia to deal with everything of our past with Timor-Leste. But the spirit is actually, after Indonesia recognized the independence of East Timor, after Indonesia is doing its best to support East Timor for its nation building, after we fully support the sovereignty of East Timor and looking ahead for good future of East Timor, then we'll continue building friendships and cooperation and also handling our past wisely and correctly.
Thank you. Right up here.
Hi, Mr. President. Thank you for coming here today. My name is Chris Holliday, and I'm a junior here at Harvard College. The history of the Indonesian presidency has been one in which only those who have had strong ties to the military have had successful tenures. And you have stated publicly that the military should not be involved with politics. Mr. President, you are beginning a successful tenure as president, given your recent re-election, but you also have a strong connection to the military. So is Indonesia ready for a civilian presidency, or is a strong connection to the military a prerequisite?
Well, I still remember 11 years from now when I, with small team, drafted the military reforms. The objective of the reform is stop from playing politics, back to our function as defense apparatus, respecting democratic values and rule of law in Indonesia. Since then, the military has conducted very intensive reforms, respecting human rights, respecting democratic values and practices. And the military is part of our national system. And since then, actually, we go to democracy. And if a candidate of the military is elected to be a governor or a president, that is because of the democratic process that has to be practiced, be diikuti, followed by the military men. So I have to say in this connection that the roles of the military in the politics in Indonesia is over. It belongs to the past. And we now part of the democratic system. That's thing that I have to explain in this forum. And I respect fully democracy. And that's new Indonesia, new military rules in Indonesia.
Right up here.
Good evening, Mr. President. My name is Ghanshyam Tiwari. I'm a Harvard Kennedy School student. You laid down a harmonious vision for various faiths and civilizations in Indonesia. I'd like to know what institutions are you building and inspiring and empowering to pursue this vision, and who will be the new role models towards this vision?
What was the question?
Could you ask the last part of the question
Last
again?
part, yeah.
Who will be the new role models to pursue your vision, and what will be the institutions that would be empowered to pursue this vision?
So, who will be the new role models and what institutions could carry on the vision that you just described? All the 9 points.
Yes, I am saying of our endeavor to develop a model that Indonesia is a place, is a country that Islam, modernity, and democracy can work together in harmony and in peace. We have proven in our history, actually, that Indonesia is the meeting point of the 3 civilizations, the Eastern civilization, Western civilization, and Islamic civilizations. And we are able to live for centuries with that kind of situation. So what we are doing now is to strengthen this institution in the larger dimension, in a broader meaning, to maintain this existence. Of course, we are facing challenges because of globalizations, because of the interconnection between one country to another, Indonesia and the Middle East and other places. So that's why we are trying our best to preserve these values. It is not taken for granted. We have to maintain it. And I do believe by empowering through religious leaders, empowering the prominent figure in the society through education, I believe that we are able to maintain this culture of harmony and peace. Of course, we will continue facing challenges, but I believe very strongly that Indonesia will be able to maintain it. And I have to go back to what has been adopted in the Mecca Declarations, new charter of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, that actually Islamic nation also respect democracy and human rights. So it is a time that we could live, we could learn to live together again. In my view, democracy, Islam, and modernity that can live together.
Right over here.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Peter. I am a student here at the Kennedy School. My question is on the ASEAN integration, how ASEAN community can work together to overcome issues and move forward. What is your vision for this partnership, and what are the key success factors? Is there anything we can learn from the European integration in the past decade? Thank you.
Yes, ASEAN has adopted new charter. ASEAN is now becoming more structured, rule-based, and united by rules, objectives, and also principles. I believe very strongly when all ASEAN economies are growing, with a new charter, we will be able to find new opportunity. And remember that we are now not only working with members of the ASEAN, we develop our togetherness with other players in Asia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and others. Even though we are not exactly what is practiced by European Union, but actually we are moving toward a more structured association and no longer loose organization that there are no rules and principles that we have to follow. But remember, ASEAN has its own way. How ASEAN settle the problems, how ASEAN solve the problems inside ASEAN or ASEAN with other economic groupings in our region. So that's ASEAN, and I believe that our cohesion will be better, and we will find more opportunities ahead.
Right over here.
Hello, Mr. President. I'm Widarmika dari Indonesia, at Kennedy School student, and my question is on your vision on inequality and harmony among non-Muslim and Muslim people in Indonesia. So 6 years ago, when I was in university, I was not been able to become the president of a student association, mainly because I'm not Muslim, and my case is not uncommon, and it's not only at the level of university. So my question is, I would like to understand your vision of equality and harmony between Muslim and non-Muslim in Indonesia, whether in your vision this situation will still happen, and also what will you do in the next 5 years on the next term to achieve your vision. Thank you so much.
Yes, there must be a few cases that thing is not along with our principles. But remember, actually, I'll give my own example. When I have to appoint ministers, my staffs, I never look at the identity. Minister Fortret is non-Muslims. He is Chinese by yes, as a descendant. Yeah. So actually, election is election. I don't know what happens with the elections of the student organization leader, but actually we practice that there is equality in choosing the profession and anything in our society. So there must be a case, and I have to admit, in the past, the relation between, for example, the Chinese descendant and others are not easy. But we learn a lot how to bring harmony, how to respect others. And we issued a law, regulation, in the past 5 years in my tenure to end uneasiness in having relation of one identity with another. So we will continue this new relations in our country, and as I have said, the harmony among us must be continuously preserved. It's not be taken for granted. So I am hoping that we'll be moving in a correct destiny, and I could say now that we are progressing on that, on that situation.
Right up here.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Katie Zavadsky. I'm a first-year student at Harvard College. My question is about your vision for the 21st century. What does the possibility of a nuclear Iran mean for your vision of the 21st century as a century of soft power and a mending of relations between Western nations and Muslim nations? And what advice would you give to Western leaders for dealing with this possibility?
Can you translate? Yes. Let me explain first the position of Indonesia toward Iranian nuclear issue. Indonesia supports the development of nuclear for peaceful purposes, and Indonesia never supports if the development of nuclear is, I should say, toward building a nuclear weapon. Indonesia is the signature of the Non-Proliferation Treaty of the nuclear weapon. So it's quite clear. When I met the leader of Iran, I did say the Indonesian position. I know that there are problems and challenges related to that issue. And I did say, when I met again the Iranian leaders, that Iran must cooperate well with IAEA, because IAEA determine the mechanism, the procedures, the rules to be followed by any nation if we are to develop a nuclear weapon for peaceful purposes. And I am told that actually there is an opportunity to continue negotiation between Iran and others to find a proper solution. This afternoon, I got a report from my foreign minister who is now in New York, and he told me that a few days from now there will be a meeting between Iran and P5 plus Germany to discuss the possible settlement of the nuclear Iranian nuclear issue. I do hope that because we are still having resources to find solution peacefully, politically, then we go to other alternatives that it may be destabilizing the region. So my preference is, as also the topic of my my speech, soft power. Why don't we use soft power first by finding political solution with Iran, and of course with hope that Iran should also cooperate well, not only with IAEA, but also with the UN and other countries to find a solution.
We have time for just 2 more questions. This will be this.
Mr. President, thank you for your time. My name is Dan Ginsberg. I'm a student here at the Kennedy School. My question is about Burma. You spoke of soft power and the strength of democracy in Indonesia. My question is, can you please describe for us what you see as the role for Indonesia in supporting democratic reform in Burma, in particular in light of the non-interference principle of ASEAN? How can Indonesia support true democratic reform in Burma, not reform necessarily as the military might see it, but true democratic reform there?
Yes. When I have the opportunity to meet with leaderships in Myanmar, I did say that Indonesia and ASEAN are really hoping that road to democracy in Myanmar can be done properly, as promised by Myanmar itself. And I know that next year will be the elections in Myanmar. And I did say that the elections must be inclusive, must be bringing all components of politics in Myanmar, must be transparent, must be credible and accountable, and by that the international community will believe that democracy is moving well in Myanmar. I think that we have to ensure the democratic process that is done now in Myanmar. Specifically, we have to focus on the conduct of elections next year. By that, I believe when the international community, the ASEAN community can be part of the democratic process in Myanmar, and with, of course, the willingness of the leadership of Myanmar to bring everybody, including Aung San Suu Kyi, in the process of election, I think ASEAN, Indonesia, and world will believe, I should say, yes, will believe that the democratic process is done properly in Myanmar.
It's the last question.
Thank you. My name is Ahmed Jalal. I'm a student at the Kennedy School. My question to you is regarding Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia. At the time of October 2002 bombing and subsequent bombings, there was a big threat from Jemaah Islamiyah to Indonesia, which has significantly been curtailed. So it doesn't pose a tactical strategic threat as some people thought it might. My question to you is, with regards to other Muslim countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Yemen, who face significant terrorism threat, Islamic terrorism threat, what lessons and experience can you share with them so that they can be successful in dealing with the threat of Islamic extremism within their own population? Thank you.
Yes. Terrorists is terrorist, and I think you agree with me that terrorism is against the true teaching of Islam. It is a crime, it's the extraordinary crimes that we have to fight it. Indonesia has launched two-pronged approach in combating terrorism. One, we have to use soft power actually to maintain the force of moderation in our nation, our society. We have to deal with the root causes of terrorism, radicalism, backwardness, injustice, and others. But on the other hand, we have to directly combat the act of terrorism, like what we have done in Indonesia. I believe you know that we have killed the two top terrorist leaders in Southeast Asia, not only in Indonesia. Both are Malaysian by citizen, Dr. Asahari and Nurdin Muhammad Top, that for almost 8 years leading terrorist acts in Indonesia. So actually we will continue to do so, and if we could cooperate well, if we could take lessons from our experience in combating terrorism, we have to separate the self-radicalism with the bulk of our community, our society. We have to empower the true religious leaders of Islam, and we have to convince, we have to explain to Ummah, to the people, that terrorists is terrorists. It's not to be seen as Islamic people who fight for justice is wrong. So we have to still determine that there is no middle ground. We have to combat terrorism at all costs for saving our nation, for saving Ummah, for saving the good great names of Islam. That's my answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Would you like to say a final word? Would you like to say any final words?
That's
Would you like to say a final word?
That's okay, sir.
Mr. President, thank you for your uplifting vision, but also a set of practical steps. We will now have to teach the 9 steps in the Kennedy School going forward. Thank you very much for sharing with us your ideas and your insights. We wish you the very best in the years ahead. Thank you very much. And safe journeys to all of you.